Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming back for another episode of the Grief Empowerment Theory. The Grief Empowerment Theory has been designed to be able to let people know that, you can go through challenges in life, but it's not about what has happened, it's about how you react to it. Taking a Stoic philosophy to this whole thing. But the reality is, you have so much power in you. You have to convince yourself that you can bring it out and then understand that the challenges you go through are fuel. I have a gentleman today who has done just that. His name is JP Horgan, and Mr. Horgan has an interesting story. I Please take the first off, introduce yourself, JP, and let the crowd know what's going on.
Hey, John. Yeah. First of all, thanks for having me. I'm appreciate it. I love what you're doing. I think we can help people with this today. And so my name's JP. I'm a coach. I'm a writer. I'm a runner. That's what I do. These are the things I wake up every day and I'm blessed enough and fortunate enough to do. And through that, I get to help other people overcome obstacles. I do this through my past experience. And I find that most of the time as a coach, the best person we can help is who we used to be 4 or 5 years ago. And that's exactly what I'm doing. So, again, thank you for the opportunity.
Well, that's the most incredible thing because I know that my personal situation is the same thing. I find that the best people to be able to help are people that were just like us. Um, talk to the crowd about the person you used to be and the person you are now.
Yeah, thank you. So, I like to describe it as I was sleepwalking through the matrix for maybe 4 decades. And something happened. I don't know if you want to call it a midlife crisis, a spiritual awakening, or just growing up, but it took me longer than most maybe to grow up. I used to think everybody did the same thing. And so, just to give you an example, our subdivision, we would just all go to work, race down the street, do our job, whatever it was, come back, and then everybody would stand around drinking beer. And I just thought everyone did this because no matter what neighborhood I went in, it was the same thing. And then something happened. I ended up getting hurt, maybe around 2009. I kept getting hurt at work, and I would go get X-rays, and they would say they're fine. There's nothing wrong with you. So I would go back to work, and then maybe 6 months later, same thing. Eventually, I found out that there's a tumor in my spine, and that's what was causing all this pain. And so, of course, they give you one pill for pain, another for something else, and then some other pill to counter that pill. And before you knew it, I was up to 33 pills a day. And I ended up in a mobility scooter to get around. My life was really bad. And I feel bad for the people around me because they had to witness that and be a part of it. But I'm talking about chronic pain where I couldn't laugh, cough, sneeze, or breathe without just deep soreness. And so I would wake up every day knowing exactly what was going to happen. I was going to take 7 pills in the morning and be in pain. I would take more pills in the afternoon. And so pretty much what happens when that happens is you can take your past and just throw it onto your future. I could tell you 10 years from now what was going to happen. I'd wake up and take pills, right? And so I don't know if you want to pause there, but then go forward. So going forward, I ended up um, just saying no. Like I started with one of the medications, I stopped taking that one, and then eventually, slowly, I got off all medications, and my whole world changed after that.
You know, it's interesting because medical science, they will lead us to believe that we have to start taking these particular medications or going through these particular therapies in order to be able to get better. What ends up happening is, like you said, you end up becoming a pest dispenser. You're, you know, you are taking medication after medication, one to counteract the other, one to address this, one to address that. And the reality is, it seems like sometimes the solution is more problematic than the actual problem was. You know,
Right.
when you decided to be tired of being sick and tired, where was that revelation?
Yeah. So I was turning 40 years old, and my son was about to turn 5. And I just remember thinking, this kid deserves way more than what I'm offering. And I wasn't showing up, not because I didn't want to, probably good pills mask everything, right? And it pushes you down your soul and everything. And so that's when I made a decision. I'm turning 40 this year. He's turning 5. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life doing this. And that's all it was, a decision. And Albert Einstein has a beautiful quote. He says, the most important decision you can ever make is whether you believe you live in a friendly or a hostile universe. And the reason it's such a beautiful quote is that he says it's a decision and it's based on belief. And so you get to decide, what do you believe? Is the world around you hostile or is it friendly? Same guy, Albert Einstein, he has another one. He says either everything's a miracle or nothing's a miracle. You can't have it both ways. It has to be all or none.
Well, it's that's why I love your philosophy, because it's a lot of what I talk to my clients about. The reality is everything is a decision. The truth of the matter is things have happened. We cannot do anything about that. But what we can do is control the way we think about it. And the way we think about it can adjust where our future lies. Do we want our future to be, like you said, the prediction of what you thought about or what you were doing already? We're thinking 10 years from now, I'll be doing the same thing. Or do you want to do what you actually did, was decide to say, I'm done with this and move forward? That that is such a key in any circumstance. Belief is Belief and faith are the first two. I call them catalysts to
Yeah.
be able to move a person forward. And before I get any deeper, because I'll go all day, JP, let talk to me about the uh, the next step academy, please.
Yeah, it's kind of cool because at the time, my company's called the Next Steps Academy. And so at the time, I was looking for the next steps in my life. It had absolutely nothing to do with walking or running, but somehow through this, I became a runner. And so now the next steps fits even more. But that's what it was. I was always like, what's the next step? I think Martin Luther King Jr. has a beautiful quote. You're going to hear lots of quotes today, but
Okay.
Martin Luther King has one, and it says, take the first step in faith. You don't have to see the whole staircase, just take the first step. And what happens with that is you go and take a step in a direction wherever you want. Let's say you want to become a writer. Well, you start writing something, right? Let's say you want to become a runner. You start running. But if you just take that very next step, you don't have to see the whole staircase, like you said. But the very next step, what happens is once you get to that step, the next step after that will reveal themselves, and the next, and the next, and the next. And the reason that you can't just go to the end or see the whole picture is because the person you are today is going to change as you start taking steps. And so as you begin to take steps down the road to what you want, you become a totally different person. And then that person starts to create next steps. But at the very beginning, you can't see it all because you have to become a different person along the way.
It's interesting because I I heard a quote from Jordan Peterson. And see, yes, we're gonna back and forth quotes all day. I can see just now, but this quote was interesting because what he said was that you have to learn to burn off the old version of you. And what's interesting is you've grown up with that version for so long, which is the reason why You can't expect an immediate result. If you, for 40 years, if you've been a certain way, you can't think, I've been doing this for 3 months, so I should change. You
Yeah.
are changing, but change is incremental. And sometimes, you know, look, a a single step is better than no step at all. And the entire time, back to the Jordan Peterson thing, the entire process, you are going to be feeling the burn. That change is an evolution. And that evolution means that you have to start letting go of your past, representative of burning. You may have to let some people go, again,
Right.
representative of burning. You may have to let some of the things that used to be in your favorite lexicon go. For me, I remember it. Look, I was a big Jelly Donut fan. That was my thing. And and again, I don't have a weight problem or anything like that. But you know what? It's about discipline. It's also about the fact that jelly donuts are not healthy for you. They're good. They're just not healthy. But you can make the choice to say to yourself, well, I'm not heavy set. I can have, but then you start having issues with cholesterol. You start having issues with, blood pressure, possible diabetes, things that are not on your radar, you know. But again, I digress. I can have this conversation all day. JP, how did you go from taking 30 pills a day to running a couple marathons, man? I haven't done one, and I'm not doing 26 miles. So, you know, again, please, seriously, tell the audience how you went from one extreme to the other.
All right, great. Let me first go back and touch on a couple of those other things. So the diet, the jelly donut diet's the easiest one, right? If you, when you were young, you were a certain weight, but if you grow your whole life and you start getting overweight, because you've ate like that for 30 years, it's not going to switch overnight. So you just have to go low, go slow is my philosophy. What
Okay.
Jordan Peterson talks about, that I call that shedding layers, right? We're shedding our old stuff, and we need that. We need to be grief, whatever it is. We need to have that bad, sad. We need to have that misery, whatever it may be, in order to get to the next level. But there's a next level. And then the final thing right there, before I tell you about the pills to mobility scooter to marathon, is stress. This is from actually a psychology course I took, a university course, and it says stress. The definition in the psychology textbooks of stress is pressure or demand placed on an organism to adjust or adapt. So, like, we think of stress and we think it's the worst thing. It's necessary, it's important. You cannot grow without stress. So, now I digress. And I'll tell you the pills to marathon. So, it came in conjunction with the doctor. You cannot do, if you're especially on that amount, you cannot do this by yourself. You have to do it with a professional. So what would happen is I made the decision, like we talked about earlier, I changed my beliefs and said, I'm not doing this anymore. I took back my power from the doctor. That was the very first thing. I
Okay.
just assumed my whole life that you're a doctor. I'm not. You went to school 30 years ago to be a doctor, so you must know everything. And here you go. And then the second I took back my power, everything changed. But I made that decision, and slowly over the course of 4, 5, 6 months, we just weaned down one by one. So I tried to cut out one medication and see if there's any reactions, then the next, the next, the next. And so very quickly, or it depends how you look at it, but within 4 or 5 months, we went from 33 down to zero. What happened is when you're taking that much medication, I'm sure some of your listeners will know you're in this fog. There's a haze. You can't think properly. You don't remember things. You have no motivation. And that's what the pills do. They just mask it like a band aid. They don't actually fix the problem, they just mask the problem. So once I got off the pills, the doctor who I had to see, I've been seeing this doctor for 10 years, every month, 2 months. But during this process, I had to see him 2 or 3 times a week. And so we developed an even tighter relationship than we already had. And something he said is like, well, is there ever a time when you're not in pain? I'm like, not really. He's like, what do you do all day? I'm like, I just read books. He goes, what kind? And I'm talking James Patterson, John Grisham, those kind of crime thriller novels, right? James Patterson's a good one for anyone stuck and taking lots of pills because his chapters are only 2 or 3 pages, so you can get through it quick. But he goes, do you ever read nonfiction? And I'm kind of like, not unless my high school teacher told me to. Right. And so then I started reading nonfiction, and you brought up a good one. Jordan Peterson has 2 great books, but so many of these books, right? And so all of a sudden I started accumulating this knowledge, and I had a hunger for it. I would read every morning for an hour, but once I started accumulating the knowledge, now the things changed. Now the doctor doesn't have the power. Now I have my own power. You can make your own decision. And so one thing for sure, the information is out there, and reading is, I would tell anyone, reading is the number one thing that changed my life. In the last 6 years, I've probably read 500 books, and some of them over and over again. And it's amazing. So I'm not sure if that answers your question. Oh, so then how did we get to marathon? So during the COVID lockdown, okay, all this stuff with the pills happened like 1 year before that. And then, so when COVID came around, I was like, man, everything I've been doing and learning this past year has prepared me for this. And I knew right away, the second this guy's like, it's going to be like a year or 2 years, whatever. I was like, I need to come out of this better than I went in. And so I just committed to myself little things every day. I'm going to do 50 push-ups every morning. I'm going to meditate every day. I'm going to fast every day. I'm going to eat right. I'm going to read every day. I'm going to journal every day. And I was taking all different kinds of courses online, and I made sure I had 2 all the time. And so I definitely came out better than I went in. But it started out walking. I just would walk around my neighborhood. And then let's say there's a loop that ends up being 3 miles. Maybe the last quarter mile I started running, and then I would walk it, and the last half mile I would run, and then finally and add up, go low, go slow. Then all of a sudden, before you know it, you're running 3 miles loops, no problem. Then you add another mile, and so on and so forth. And so maybe in September 22nd, September 11th, 2022, I said, and I was up to probably about 8 miles. And I said, you know what? I'm going to run a half marathon, which is 13 miles. And so 3 weeks later, I run this half marathon, and it was like, hey, this is fun. So then last year, I don't think I've told you, or I don't think it was even in the description, that I facilitate groups for chronic pain, anxiety, and depression. But that's all about belief. And that group has a hard time with belief. So last year, I started out with marathon. I'm going to run a full marathon. Why? Because I can't do it. Why? Because I don't believe I can do it. Why? Because I don't know how to do it. And the idea with running the full marathon was that I can take this back to my group and say, look, I don't believe I can do it. I don't know how to do it. And I don't even think it's possible to do it, but I'm going to do it. And so we started with the go low, go slow. January, it was all about just being on my feet for 2.5 hours at a time. I would just walk in circles, and not in circles. I would just walk around this loop in our driveway and practice being on my feet. February, I added in a bit of running. Anyway, I did this whole marathon training, and you can see very easily, okay, like day one, I did not believe I could do it, but I believe that I could get to a place where I could do it. And so that's what I did. And even better, the average marathon time is 4 hours, 20 minutes. And I finished in 3 hours, 57 minutes. So
Okay.
I'm, yeah, pretty happy with that.
Okay. Well, what's interesting is exactly what you just said. It's all about your state of mind. It's all about how you set the parameters. If you There's a very interesting African proverb that says, "The man who can and the man who can't is the same man. And that's the reality. When you tell yourself, see, the mind is interesting because it will accommodate however you're thinking. So if you're telling yourself you can't do something, the mind will be like, you're right, you can't do it. And it'll create these justifications
Yeah.
for why you don't have the ability. But then on the other side, to do what you did, to say, you know what? I don't know, but I'm gonna figure it out on the way. The mind, your mind was like, you know what? Let's help this guy out. Let's figure out together what he's gonna do. And I think when you speak to a lot of your clients, especially those with chronic pain, they already they're looking at their history and they're not looking at their possibility. What's interesting is how do you move them from ex- their understandings and their histories to being able to explore options and possibilities? How do you do that?
Yeah, it's go low, go slow is the idea. So it depends obviously on the person's situation, but someone who's really stuck. Let's say somebody who does has agoraphobia. They're afraid to go out of their apartment because just whatever. What I want them to do is I want them to just go in the hallway and walk back and forth down the hallway. It depends what the person's trying to do, but you have to figure out their belief system, figure out where those limiting beliefs are coming from, and if they still serve them today. Sometimes we have these beliefs that we just carry, and you ever hear people say, "You sound like your father, you sound like your mother." You're just recurring the pattern, right? You don't even know why, and so you have to figure out the beliefs that are hurting you and empower yourself with new beliefs. And some of those beliefs are still okay to carry today, right? Like my mom taught me, like, don't step out in front of a car because you're going to get hit. Okay, that's a good
Right.
belief to have, right? But some aren't, right? So we have to determine that. I think a big thing I see is that when you ask somebody, what do you want? If you could have a magic wand and do whatever you want, what would it be? A lot of people are stunned at the question because nobody's ever asked them and they've never thought about it. So that's one thing. But it depends who we're talking to. I'm assuming with this conversation, we're talking to people who are in a world of grief, who feel overwhelmed, stuck, feel hopeless. And
Yes.
so the first thing with that is that I want you to just take clouds, for example, right? Sometimes there's gray clouds, rain clouds coming through, and then other times there's nice white puffy clouds. But you're the sun and you're always there. And so if you wait long enough, the clouds will move, but you need to it's not just going to happen, right? You need to take action. And I showed you a list of all the things I do every day. Like, checklist is a good one. I started this list. When is this? Maybe. Wow, July 2020 is when I started it. But you see that? All those marks? Just like a graph chart. And what I would do is put all those things: walking, meditation, writing, reading, learning, fasting, stretching, cold shower, whatever it is. Start with one, right? And I would just, if I did it, I would give myself a little check mark. And if I didn't do it, I would leave it blank. What happens that way is, like you said earlier, how sometimes your brain will find the negative, it will talk you out of it. So let's say I go walk for 21 days in a row, but then I miss 2 or 3 days in a row. It's real easy to miss 2 or 3 days and be like, man, I suck. This is no. But if you have that,
Yeah.
the map, you can look back and be like, okay, well, you know what? I did miss 2 days, but that's because somebody was in the hospital or whatever the reason. But I also did do 21 days. And so you accumulate, you create the evidence in your life. And it goes back to identity. Atomic Habits, I'm sure you know the book. That's a
Yes.
great one. Pick the identity of the person you want to be and then work towards it. You're not going to get there overnight, but slowly work towards it. So me, what do I want to be? I want to be a writer, runner, and coach. That's what I am. That's what I decided a long time ago I want to be. And what does that look like? Well, every single day I just do the things that those identities would do. What would a runner do? He would run. What would a writer do? He would write. What would a coach do? He would coach. So that's what I do.
It's interesting because for me, I talk to my clients a lot about reinforcement, and it's exactly what you're talking about. When I say reinforcement of a habit, I always I talk to them about the negative habits that they already do. And the first thing I do is say, find a way to look at the present habit that you've already reinforced.
Right.
And now let's find a new pattern, one that's healthy for you, one that is counter to the negative habit. And just like you've been able to reinforce this negative habit, you can do that with this positive habit. You have to change your mindset because remember, you love whatever it was that was creating your negative circumstance.
Right.
So, automatically in your mind, because you're switching to something else, in your mind, you're going to hate it.
Yeah.
So, you have to take some time to build up that love for it. It's it's interesting. But again, like I said, I we can have this conversation all day. Uh, Talk to me about your podcast, the Phase 4 podcast. First off, I've had the pleasure of actually being on it. So I want to thank you for that. And I think that's a big reason why I was blessed enough to be able to have you on this particular show. But like I said, I talk about the Phase 4 podcast and what your goal and your mission is with that podcast.
Yeah. So first of all, your episode is actually coming out this Friday. So that's perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But this is another thing about just chasing a dream and an identity. And I guess a big part too of the whole thing is that I used to care what other people think. Now I don't care. So this is this, right? So I kind of always wanted to do a podcast and I wasn't really sure what I wanted. But then at the beginning of COVID, I enrolled in a couple of different certifications and I found my tribe. Your vibe attracts your tribe. And so I found the people I needed, not that I needed, but I found the people, okay, now I can do the show. I didn't want it to be just me talking on the microphone about, hey, do some push-ups or whatever. So it's called the Phase 4 podcast. What we focus on expands. And I talk to coaches and creatives about where they were, where they are, and where they're going. And Phase 4, the name itself it comes from the 6 phase meditation by Vishen Lakhiani from Mind Valley. And Phase 4 in the 6 phase is about creating a future 3 years out, exactly 3 years out. The reason he came to that conclusion was, I think it was Bill Gates. He said, we tend to overestimate what we can get done in 1 year, but underestimate what we can get done in 10 years. So you try to set your vision 3 years out. And during that meditation, what you do is you visualize what you want 3 years from now. And you go back and redo this meditation over and over. And what happens is every time you go revisit your dream, you come back with more detail. And then it's like it gives your brain a target to go for. And I can tell you that when I started doing it, all of the things that I tried for 3 years out, all of them came true, but quicker than 3 years and way better than I could have ever imagined. Part of that is because when I started, I wasn't the same person as we moved down the road. So what do I do on the podcast? I get to have awesome conversations like this with coaches and creatives. We talk body, mind, spirit. So I appreciate you asking about that.
Because what's interesting is it goes back to what we were talking about. You said to yourself, you know what? It's something I want to do, but I don't know how to go about doing it. What is interesting about that is the second thing you said, your vibe your vibe attaches to your tribe. And that is a very real statement because when you have a vision towards something, the universe will automatically bring people into your orbit, or there will be things in your orbit that will come into your orbit that will allow you to understand how to better learn what it is that you want to learn. But you have to give yourself the opportunity to do it. It starts back what I said before and what you said. It starts with belief. You have to believe that you have the ability to do it. It look, you can't be wrapped up in the how. You can,
Yeah.
you can only be, you can only let yourself say, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to achieve the goal. And what ends up happening is you begin to start unraveling the how part without even realizing you didn't know how, but you actually did know how. You couldn't put it in your mind to formulate what that how was or how that how was going to look. And a big part of that is because we want to determine our how based on how other people view it. And when we do that, we at times rob ourselves of the
Yeah.
opportunity because we're so busy wanting to have the outside people validate us. So again, we're going to try to measure you said something that was great. I used to care what people think. Now I don't care. You know, talk a little bit about how that philosophy has not only helped you, but has been able to allow you to move forward.
Yeah, for sure. So I think what happens is, like you're saying, we put our validation outside of ourselves, and we're seeking love outside of ourselves, not realizing that nobody can give it to you. You can only give it to yourself. And so the part of it is that, like I said at the very top, I was sleepwalking through the matrix. So all the other people around me were also doing that, and still are, some of them. And so I don't care if, like, so okay, if I'm trying to do something and the people around me are, oh, you can't, you shouldn't, blah blah blah, that says more about them than me. Like, that's their fear, right? And they're projecting their fear on us. Earlier you're saying about the mind. The mind's just a mirror, right? You project it in your life whatever you want. What's that one quote? Um, from Paradise Lost. He says, the mind in of itself can create a heaven of hell or a hell of heaven, something like that, right here on earth. And it's true. So the mind's just projecting it, and we're seeing it in our outer world. And I guess part of this could be attributed to Hollywood, media, schools, even the people who love you and care about you. They just want the best for you. They're fast asleep too, so they don't even know. When I seen this on the weekend, we were at a dance competition with my kids, and all the mothers, the way they're talking to their kids and about their kids in front of their kids, I'm like, do you realize? Like, what did one lady's like? Her kid wanted ice cream. She's like, it's $9. And the mother's like, do you think you're worth $9 after the way you acted this morning? And I'm
Wow.
in my head, I'm like, okay, not only are you making a 7-year-old question their worth, but now you're also making their worth attached to money. And we all know, like, money doesn't do it. Like, if it did, you wouldn't see billionaires like Kate Spade kill themselves.
Right.
So I was just gonna say about Les Brown, because earlier you were talking about pushing your limits, and I was gonna say that Les Brown has a song on one of these audios called "Stretch Yourself," a speech. Just, you have to stretch yourself. It goes back to the stress. But then, even better, as I was saying that, Les Brown, you said the how. He has a beautiful. He says the how is none of your business. Your job is to dream.
And that's exact. Interesting because again, I listen to a lot of Les Brown, so that's probably where that did come from. But you said something that was interesting. You talked about the definition of stress, and you actually brought it up. And what's interesting is you said stress is not a bad thing, and it's interesting because there's two forms of stress. There is distress, which is the negative stress. And then there's eustress, which is, again, something like you're doing push ups
Right.
and that resistance, it's difficult, but it's bringing you to an end goal of getting you more in shape, making you more fit. That's eustress. You know, I think what happens is we put a label on stress to solidify the fact that, or I'm sorry, to solidify our perceptions that things are so tragic and difficult that we can't get through them. But we don't understand that there are two aspects to stress. We're so, our definitions are always attached to the distress aspect of stress.
Right.
And, unfortunately, in certain situations, we have to learn to embrace it. Like when I talk to people about grief, my specialty is grief empowerment. And I let people know that the challenges that you've gone through, that distress that you've gone through, can create a eustress outcome.
Nice.
What you can do is when you learn, certain things can happen. I give examples all the time. I talk about the fact that there's no way Buster Douglas should have been able to beat Mike Tyson, but he
No
did.
way.
And it happened a couple of days before his mother died. You know, I mean, Brett Favre. I talk about Favre all the time, and back in '03, I mean, he put on a football clinic against the Raiders. And that was 24 hours after his father died from a heart attack. But I
Right.
mean, the guy, they murdered the Raiders 42-7. You know, and every commentator was like, he's probably not going to play. Or if he
Right.
does, he's going to play so poorly. The reality is, again, the reality is we can shift the negative energy to serve us. We're not going to not be affected by the grief, but how we choose to allow the grief to affect us will provide the outcome. You know, I mean, again, like I said, you and I, we seem to be aligned in a lot of ways, and I do not want to take over this interview. So please go ahead, finish elaborating on the fact that you like to talk to your clients about finding a way forward. And how do you get them out of that negative mindset? I know we talked about it a little bit before, but this is the part that I really want people in the audience to understand because it relates to grief. What you're doing directly relates to grief. It doesn't have to be a person who's lost someone. It you are losing your identity. You are having the grief of a health matter when those particular things are happening. So how do you get people to change their mindset? I
The
know
very
I'm sorry. Please go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say the very first thing is you can't change someone who doesn't want to change. So the other person has to want the change. But once they do, yeah, it is the go logo. So I know I say it again and again, but it's true. So it starts with little things, right? Keeping promises to yourself is a really big one. If you don't keep promises to yourself, then you beat your own self-esteem. And so that's why with that list of things, that's huge because as you start doing things and showing up for yourself, then then you can start to grow, you start to build confidence, build self-esteem. um, I think like if you picture a huge ocean liner, right, and it wants to turn around, you're going straight. It's not just going to be able to turn around. You got to take a wide turn, and that might be a lot slower than you expect. What's his name? Les Brown again. He says if you're going in the wrong direction, all you have to do is turn around. But I think it comes down, there's lots, right? So when we start off with a client, the very first thing we'll do is give them some surveys, quizzes, one that your guest listeners can take and use and really use is called um, the VIA, Values in Action. It's called VIA Character Strength Survey. And this is from University of Pennsylvania. It's from the creator of positive psychology, Martin Seligman. He was the president of the American Psychiatric Association, and he looked at it in 1998 and he decided, hey, wait a minute. All we do with psychology is try to make sick people better. But what if you're already okay and you're just struggling a little bit? How can we make you thrive and flourish? And so he came up with these 24 character strengths, virtues like loyalty, love, service, health. There's a bunch. And so you go to university. Okay, the website's called authentichappiness.org. And then you look for VIA Character Strength Survey. You fill out this survey. It's 200 questions. And then what it does, it gives you your top 5 values. And everybody I've ever talked to, they're like, oh my God, that's so accurate. So you just start noticing in your life, right? You have to harvest the gold. I gave a speech yesterday about all of us. We have gold in our past. And in order to grow and expand, we need to harvest the gold. And so even, the yin yang, even there's a little bit of good in the bad, a little bit of bad in the good, and we're trying to find balance. So we have to go back, and in the bad things, I wouldn't change my story. I went through a decade of hell, and I wouldn't change it for a second. And I'm sure you hear this all the time, that people wouldn't change it because they wouldn't be where they are today. I think a couple other important things. You said earlier about that once you make that decision, that the universe kind of aligns. And so Paulo Coelho, the alchemist, the quote is, when you want something, all the universe conspires in helping you achieve it. And so I would almost argue that we're getting it anyway, even with the bad. And if you're saying, oh, I can't and I couldn't and that's not for me and I'm not good enough, you're getting that in your life, but it's because you're speaking it out and you're sending it out, that signal. So Joe Dispenza says, thoughts are electric, feelings are magnetic. You send out the thought, that's energy. You send it out of your body, and it bounces along in the quantum field as a wave until it meets its match. You and me matched, and that doesn't mean we're going to align on every single thing, but whatever it is, it bounces along. And it might not come back exactly how you want, like we talked about earlier, but it will bounce along until there's someone else. Well, that's where your vibe attracts your tribe. The way you bring it back to you is by feeling it. So as you pray or meditate or think or journal, you have to feel it. What would it feel like? Can I feel the sun on my skin? I feel the rain pouring on my neck, and I'm standing out by the pond in Lake Travis. Is that what it's called down there? Lake Travis. And so once you feel it, then that's when you're going to magnetize it back to you. And like I said, it might not come the way you want. And I don't think I even answered your question. I have a couple more quotes, so go ahead.
No, actually, you did. See, what's interesting is what you just said is the fact that most people actually, what we have done is we desensitize ourselves. So a lot of people, for instance, let's take running in the rain for analogy. There are so many people that will not want to get wet. They're like, they can have the largest umbrella in the world, but they're like, I don't want to get wet. Versus the person that just walks out in the rain and just says, hey, I'm going to accept the fact that I'm going to get wet and I'm going to enjoy what the experience is. Where people will look at that person like they're strange. But before umbrellas were invented, most people got wet. You know, so
Yeah,
it's
I love
amazing.
that.
It's amazing that we have created a zone of desensitization around us and whatever.
Right.
For instance, men we're not supposed to cry. Well,
Yeah.
I think we were given the the ability to be sensitive. So now what we're doing is we're shutting that off because society says we're not supposed to. And
Right.
that is a big reason why a lot of mental anguish and grief exists because we're shutting off or we're attempting to shut off parts of us that are not meant to be shut down. We are consciously doing everything we can to suppress them. And in the fight to suppress them, we're not looking at the fact that we're using so much energy to fight the things that we shouldn't fight, that the things that we should be fighting, they come at us full force and we feel like we can't handle them.
Right.
It's very interesting because I think, like I said, in 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 what you do is, you let people know that it's possible. You've done it. And again, it's not just the fact that you're a superhero. You know,
No.
it's the fact that you made that, again, what you talked about at the beginning. You made that decision, and a lot of people don't want to decide because, see, decision means that they have to come out of their comfort zone,
Hmm.
and nobody nobody in that position wants to come out of their comfort zone. They're actually they are okay with being comfortable in their discomfort
Right.
because,
Because it's familiar.
yeah, it's familiar. And also, they're also always looking to garnish sympathy. They want
Right.
someone else to say, "Oh, you poor person, I'm so sorry that this has happened." You know, so that you can feel, again, back to, you can feel justified for you not doing the things that you know you need to do. Plus, you already know when you say to a person, you know, like the person that was afraid to leave their apartment, open your door, just walk down your hall. What can you say to yourself that's keeping you from doing that? It's like, where is justification that you opening up your door and walking down your hall 2 or 3 times is going to put you in a situation where your life is going to get worse. Your life's already bad because you won't even leave your house.
Right.
You know, s- again, it all just comes down to our states of mind. It comes down to our mindsets. It comes down to where we're looking to think about a certain thing. Uh, Let me ask you this: what is next on your horizon, JP? I mean, you just got finished doing a speech, doing some speaking. What's next?
Yeah, so about a month ago, hosted my first virtual conference. I'd like to move that to in persons, but it was a summit. It was called the Warrior Woman Within Summit. And I just had all these different women that I talked to through my podcast. I was like, oh my God, all your stories together combined to make this one super story of a woman's journey. So next, we're going to do a mindset and mastery for men. I would like to do one about arts and creativity, another one about mental health. And so those are summits, virtual summits, maybe hopefully in person. I'm going to end up speaking on stages. I go to Toastmasters once a week and I'm just plowing through. They have a pathways system, project system. And so that's what that is. And it's already created opportunities. Like certain people who are in that group with me have been like, oh man, can you come speak here? So I have a couple opportunities like that coming up. I'm going to continue coaching, running. I ran a half marathon this year at the beginning for the first instead of two fulls. And then I'm like, I'll start off with a half and then a full one in September. But then I found out my birthday is October 27th, and there's a marathon in Niagara Falls on my birthday. I'm turning 45. A marathon is 26 miles, but it's 42 kilometers. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to do that. But once I go past the finish line and grab the medal, I'm going to do another 3 kilometers.
Right.
On my 45th birthday, my intention, my goal, my commitment to myself is to run 45 kilometers. And so that says something about the future that I want to have, and it says something about the present moment. This is where I'm at in my life. When I was on my 35th or 25th birthday, all I was concerned was trying to drink 25 beers.
Right. Right. Right.
So, but I think intention, something you said earlier, a couple things in that you were talking about people kind of manifesting. You were talking about something else, but both the things you were talking about was one is feeling, even the person going in the hallway, right? One is thinking and one is doing, like being present and physically doing it or thinking. And when we think too much, we get stuck in our heads. And the
Yes.
answer, the easiest one is this: every time, still every time. I don't know why, and I don't know if it will ever go away. But every single time I go for a run, my brain tries to talk me out of it. And it's like, you don't have to go, just stay in bed. It's nice and warm, or it's raining, whatever it is. That's what the other one was, rain. But it's like, I know it's a trick. I tell my brain to shut up, and it's still there. And so this is it. Like, if you let your brain talk you out of it, it will. The remedy for that is just taking action. You don't have to run. You don't want to. Okay, good. I'm going to get my shoes on and go out the door. And you said it earlier about the rain, right? People in the rain. So some people are thinking, they're in their head, like, I'm not going out there. I might get wet. And the other person's like, I'm just going to go get wet. And that person who goes get wet, they're living in the present moment. They're full of life and vitality and everything like that.
The reality is, like I said, we over anticipate circumstances because we're looking at these outcomes that we think can be predictable. It, just the analogy of getting in the rain, getting wet. How many people will say you're going to catch a cold?
All the time. Little kids running, right? And the
Right,
grandparents are like, come in, you're
right,
going to get a cold. The
right.
kid's having the time of his life.
It's like, you know, again, yes, that's a possibility, but also on the other side of that coin is, you know what? That actually can see circumstances like that can actually increase your resistance. It's just like what people don't realize. We, I was just listening to this comedian, and she said the funniest thing. She goes, back in my day, kids were tough. Said, you know, I could destroy a whole high school by just throwing peanuts at them, and and it's true. It's again not to say peanut allergies are not real. I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying that if you have it, that there's something wrong. We're just saying that over time we have become so resistant to wanting to ever get dirty, or and not even in the physical sense. I'm talking about in the mental sense, where like "Oh, I don't want, I'm not going to give my kid a peanut butter jelly sandwich," and over time, 2 generations, now your child's allergic to peanut butter. You see what I'm saying? And
Sure.
don't it's very weird because same thing. It's like I mean, back in the, put it this way, another guy said, he said this, he goes, do you think cavemen got depressed?
Hmm.
They were getting chased by, you know, saber-tooth tigers. And, you know, we get stressed because there's too much traffic.
Right.
We get up, it's like we get depressed because there's some change in the environment. What we have to look at is, again, it comes back to how we're thinking about it. How are we deciding what we want to do? Um, JP, how can the audience get in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can go to the Next Steps Academy, all one word, the Next Steps Academy.com. You can find me on all the socials. If you go on Instagram, my handle is Next Steps or at the Phase 4 podcast on YouTube. That's probably a good place at Next Steps.
Okay, excellent. All his information will also be in the description. So, but I just wanted to say thank you again for giving me and giving the audience an opportunity to learn that by example you can make the changes. I mean, like I said earlier, we you talked about it. You went from taking 33 pills a day to running marathons, and you're a mindset coach, and you talk to people in chronic pain or having chronic conditions all the time. And the whole thing is about speaking to them about looking at their present reality and helping them to create a new reality, one that is more conducive to them being a better version of themselves. So
Yeah.
I really admire what you do because, like I said before, when because I speak to people who are well entrenched in their grief circumstances, they're looking at the grief related event as being them, when in
Right.
reality, the event is the event. How they're choosing to respond to the event, that is them. And now what we want to do is change how they're responding to the event. And it doesn't mean that you are losing touch with whatever the situation is. Because again, there is a sense of attachment. Again, if it's a grief related to a loss of a loved one, there is clearly a sense of attachment. But if it's related to a divorce, there's a sense of attachment. A job, sense of attachment. You know, there's a sense of attachment to everything that is the reason why people grieve. Finding out how to decouple from the feelings, not from the circumstance. The mind is going to always give you a memory of the situation. But if you decouple yourself from the event, then you can better understand how to maneuver through the circumstance. Again, like I said, we can have this kind of conversation all day. Uh, JP Horgan, incredible interview, awesome guest. Again, I want to thank you so much for your time. And I truly believe that the audience is going to get so much out of this conversation because what it's doing is explaining to them that whatever their situation is, however they're thinking about the situation, that is the thing that needs to be changed so that they can create a 2.0 version of themselves based off of the circumstances that have happened, based off of the situation, based off of how they're choosing to see it. So, again, JP Horgan, thank you so much for your time. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to say thank you. Thank you all for coming back to another episode of the Grief Empowerment Theory. We're here we talk to people about understanding that they have the power to be able to use their challenges to be able to work to their advantage. So, thank you. And I really appreciate you coming back. You can, again, we're live stream on YouTube and LinkedIn. So if you missed the episodes, if you want to be able to share this with one of your friends, my information, the information will be on my YouTube channel at Empowerment 0108. Also, I'm going to be making sure that I'm sharing the link for this particular show and directing people to so many of my other shows. So thank you so much. I know, again, I will talk to you all day, but I got to go. I appreciate your time and thank you so much,
Thank you.
JP.